This is a special report from CBS News. I'm Jane Clayson at the United States Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. The execution of Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh is underway. The worst mass murderer in U.S. history, the man responsible for the deaths of 168 people in the Oklahoma City bombing, a man who has never expressed remorse for his killings, sentenced to die by lethal injection this morning. According to a protocol issued by the Department of Justice, at this moment, Timothy McVeigh is making what the warden described as brief remarks. McVeigh had indicated that he would quote from a 19th century English poem called Invictus. 4 separate groups of people are witnessing the execution: a group of victims' relatives, government representatives, members of the media, and 4 people chosen by McVeigh himself. When McVeigh finishes his statement, the warden will read his execution order and signal the start of the lethal injection. It should take less than 10 minutes for McVeigh to die. Our national correspondent John Frankel is monitoring official word from prison officials this morning. John, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. Well, as you mentioned, if everything is going according to schedule, Timothy McVeigh should be in the execution chamber now. And we were told by Daniel Dunn, a spokesman for the Bureau of Prisons, that just before going into the room, the warden met with Timothy McVeigh.
It was a meeting in which the warden was able to explain all of the details. I wouldn't want to characterize it as a formal meeting, but it was a discussion just between the two of them.
Now, after the execution, it's expected that Warden Harley Lappin will come out to this position here, announce McVeigh's death, and relay his final statement. That will be followed by the 10 media witnesses, as well as the 2 lawyers for Mr. McVeigh, and if they want, family members of some of the victims. As for the body, at Timothy McVeigh's request, there will be no autopsy. His body will be handed over to his lawyer, Robert Nye, who will then have the body cremated, and he will dispose of the ashes in an undisclosed location. Jane?
John, thank you. Death penalty advocates and opponents are demonstrating here on the prison grounds. CBS News correspondent Cynthia Bowers has that part of the story. Cynthia, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jane. It's a relatively small group, about 200 death penalty opponents from around the country who are gathered here in this corral on the edge of the prison. Their protest has been very muted, in part because no megaphones or loudspeakers were allowed on the prison grounds, but also because immediately upon arrival at about 4 o'clock this morning, many in the group formed a spiral, and at precisely 4:12 began a 168-minute silent candlelight vigil. It was a tribute to the 168 victims of the Oklahoma City bombing, but also, as one activist told me earlier, a reminder that with Tim McVeigh's execution, there are now 169 victims, so the cycle of violence has only been perpetuated.
I call him poster boy for abolition because it solves nothing, lights a fuse in some other nut's mind because we killed McVeigh. So we're just lighting slow burning fuses that are going to come back and haunt us.
A handful of death penalty supporters are in a similar holding pen about a half mile from here. Not knowing how many people were going to show up, prison officials wanted to give the 2 groups wide berth to avoid any confrontation. Now, organizers here say they are not disappointed by what is an obviously small turnout. They cite the initial delay and then confusion as to whether this execution date would actually hold. But they say church bells are ringing and similar demonstrations are being held around the country. So they feel their message that more killing is serving no purpose is being heard this morning. Jane?
All right, Cynthia Bowers, thank you. Many bombing survivors and victims' relatives hope that McVeigh's death will allow them to move on with their lives. CBS News correspondent Bob McNamara is in Oklahoma City, where about 300 people are watching the execution on a closed-circuit telecast. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Jane. Well, the auditorium where bomb survivors and victims' family members are viewing the execution of Tim McVeigh, it's a closed-circuit broadcast, the first ever of its kind. It's located about a mile from here. More than 1,000 invitations went out to those eligible. More than 300 accepted the invitations to view it. But prison officials now say that actually 232 people have shown up. Some said they would attend, but they might not watch. Some were hoping to hear words of remorse from Tim McVeigh, but not expecting it. Some were just hoping to close another chapter in a long, sad story that never seems to end. And some said they actually might feel sorry for Tim McVeigh. Bureau of Prison officials have counselors on duty to help with those who are witnessing the execution if they need it. Witnesses were allowed to bring religious materials in, but no cameras, no cell phones, no tape recorders. It's now been 6 years, 53 days since the bombing, and this is another day here they will probably never forget. Jane.
Bob McNamara in Oklahoma City. Bob, thank you. There is no communication from inside the execution chamber. The first word we get that Timothy McVeigh's death is official will come from the warden, Harley Lappin, who will make an official announcement. So for the next several minutes, instead of focusing on Timothy McVeigh's final moments, we'd like to remember and honor the 168 lives that were taken that terrible morning on April 19th, 1995.
Each time I see any of the names, I see special little faces and things that they did, and special little places they'll always have in my heart.
Those chairs will never be filled with those people who they belong to ever again. And what have we missed because they're not here with us now?
In the bombing on April 19, 1995. And I miss him really dearly. Just like it was yesterday.
I guess it's when that many people, die at once, it's just no way to really fathom it. It was all people that I knew and cared about. We lost a lot of good people.
think of those girls at the strangest time. One of them had beautiful eyes. I think of her almost every morning when I put on my eye makeup.
I was the mailman in the building. I'd had that route 5 years. I knew every face in that building. I lost a lot of friends in the blink of an eye.
I walked around his desk, and it was so strange because it was kind of like, why am I doing this? But it just felt like I needed to. And I walked around and hugged him, and I said, you've been my best friend. And he said, no, you've been mine. That was really our last conversation. And even though it's sad, that is the most wonderful memory to hang on to.
I worked with and everybody in the building, we were a family. We weren't just a building of people, we were a family. It is up to us to make the best of our life. We owe it to those who die because they don't have this chance.
We always did everything together. You know, if we went shopping or if we went to the antique mall or wherever, we went together. If we cleaned house or cooked supper, it was together. We were just like one.
I think about the day of the bombing every day. You know, I go for weeks and weeks without shedding a tear, and I can talk about it, and it doesn't bother me. And then the very next day, I talk about it to someone, and I just bawl and cry.
The best we can do is to go on and honor those that we lost and pray it never happens again to anybody, ever.
I want the whole world to know who my Julie Marie was. She was a very special kid. She was fluent in 5 languages. She wouldn't let me brag on her when she was alive, but I do plenty of it now.
When I hear bells, I think of the movie Jimmy Stewart did. When a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, and we all hope that there were 168 who got wings that day.
The magnitude of Timothy McVeigh's crime will not soon be forgotten. And now we wait for official word of his death from prison warden Harley Lappin. We expect very soon he will leave the execution chamber and walk out to a set of microphones not far from our location to make an official report of McVeigh's death. His statement will be followed by those of several witnesses chosen to represent the media. They will give their firsthand accounts of the execution as well. This is the only federal prison in the U.S. that houses an execution facility. There are 20 other inmates on death row here. Another execution is set for next week. Juan Raul Garza is scheduled to die on June 19th. America has not seen a federal execution since 1963 until this morning. Let me bring in now Jim Stewart, our veteran Justice Department correspondent. Jim has broken many significant stories in the McVeigh case. Among them, the first to report on the FBI's mishandling of several thousand pages of documents that forced the Justice Department to delay his execution. He is in Washington this morning. Jim, good morning to you.
Jane, we've just received word that the president will make a statement in the briefing room after the execution has been confirmed there in Terre Haute. We've also checked with the Attorney General's office just moments ago, and apparently there has been no delay that we know of granted by the Justice Department or the White House in this matter. The Justice Department has a command center on the 6th floor. There are representatives there from the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General's office, and a death penalty expert. The Attorney General himself, John Ashcroft, is on his farm in Springfield, Missouri, and staying in touch by phone. If that is the case and there has been no delay, then according to the protocol that has been followed rather rigorously thus far, then I believe it is safe to say that if this execution went on schedule and it has been completed, and we are now just awaiting the official word from the officials there in Terre Haute, had there been a delay, the Attorney General would have notified a U.S. Marshal who is standing in the execution room. The Marshal is sort of the referee, if you will, there in the room. His hand is on the phone to the command center back at the Attorney General's office in Washington. He would alert the warden, who would have halted the procedure at that point. They would have determined whether it was going to be a long delay or a short delay. But again, we've received word that thus far there's been no sign of any halt in this process. So the presumption is that if it went on schedule, and everything else has this morning, then the execution has been completed and we are only awaiting word. Jane.
Jim, is the FBI still studying this case? And if so, what could they learn beyond the death of Timothy McVeigh?
They are still studying it, and it's a rather intricate affair that's going on. They believe that there is something to be learned from trying to profile people like Timothy McVeigh, who have taken it upon themselves to attack the government. They have recently completed, we're told, a psychological profile of 60 bombers who have been caught and were incarcerated. They spent days and days interviewing these individuals and have tried to come up with a profile. The results of that profile have not been made public yet, but not too surprisingly, they do seem to fit many of the same traits that Timothy McVeigh expressed, which is a deep-seated hatred of their government, a culture of one that had been in the military at some point, or at least was fascinated by the military, people who were comfortable with firearms, but more than that, people who seem to have come from relatively stable backgrounds. So there are a great many questions, I think, still out there rather than answers. But they are studying that, and today here in Washington, the federal government is very quiet. The streets of Washington, you normally see around certain anniversary dates, special security around buildings. That has not been the case this morning. The FBI did not even open their Strategic Information Center, their command post, if you will. That has been left to the Justice Department. Still, I would tell you, Jane, that there are a great many people in federal law enforcement who today are going to circle on their calendar June 11th, as well now as April 19th and June 25th, the date of the Kobar Towers, as dates that you can anticipate seeing the federal government tense up a little bit, become a little bit more vigilant, and certainly remembering what happened on this date. Jane.
Indeed. Jim Stewart in Washington. Jim, thank you. Glenn Westbury chose not to watch McVeigh's execution. He lost his 57-year-old father, Robert, in the bombing. Glenn, good morning.
Good morning.
I know the last few minutes have been difficult for you. How are you doing?
It's tough. It's hard. I'm thinking a lot more of what happened that day, and it's a struggle.
Has it hit you more than you thought it would?
Yeah, it's hit me a lot more than I thought it would. But I still think there's going to be a good that's going to come out of it. I think that we'll get through this as a family, and I hope this is a time to move on from it.
Your brother-in-law, Tony Brown, was one of the witnesses to this execution. How did he prepare himself emotionally for what he saw this morning?
Probably a lot of prayer. I know as a family we've really pulled together and prayed about that, talked through that. But after hearing some of the stuff last night, was going to take. I don't know that you can prepare for what you're going to face and what you were going to hear. Most of all, because there's kind of a lot of unknown.
You had dinner last night, as you mentioned to me before. You spoke together as a family. Was there a general consensus about what this day would mean, moving beyond this execution and trying to move on with some sort of life?
Yeah, I think it was just an opportunity to where we don't have to hear from him anymore. That he won't be able to keep voicing his I guess, lack of care for the victims and the families, and not being concerned about what we're going through and the pain that we have to live with every day.
As a witness to the execution, was your brother-in-law at all worried about Timothy McVeigh's final words, about a final statement, and what that might do to him and the other witnesses there?
We talked about that a little bit last night, and I told him, I go, expect the worst. I go, expect that, he's going to have one last shot to take, and you just don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. But regardless of that, it doesn't matter, because his words aren't going to change our future.
He wrote in letters to the Buffalo newspaper this last weekend that he has no fear of execution. He said he will improvise, adapt, and overcome if it turns out there is an afterlife. Where do you think Timothy McVeigh's spirit is today?
I don't like to stand in judgment of anyone, but I go by the person's actions. And in his, he has no relationship with God. There's no remorse there. I would say he's being judged by our Creator and is going to answer for what he's done. And unless at some point, and I prayed this morning for his soul, because he's going to suffer in hell for eternity for what he's done.
Glenn, will this bring you peace?
No, this doesn't bring me peace. My dad's still not here. I still have to live with that every day. My son has to live with that every day. So the only peace I think will come from the healing that God brings and the healing that time brings.
And your 10-year-old son?
I called. He went to school, but he's pretty upset. I mean, it's something that he relives, that he misses his pawpaw and has to deal with that every day. And, I think this will be a good time that hopefully things will get quieter so that he can focus more on the positive things and the wonderful family times he had with his pawpaw, and not the negative that's come out of it.
Glenn, we've been given word that the warden is on his way out of the execution chamber to give his final words, which means McVeigh's execution is complete. How does that make you feel?
My fear today was something was going to happen to prolong it again and make us go through it another month or however long, and that's the hardest part.
You worried that McVeigh would exercise his right to appeal to the Supreme Court if he needed to?
Exactly. I thought he'd take one last chance to get more notoriety and have another chance to speak out. And I just, like I said, I don't think that his death is going to do anything for my family, but the one thing it'll do is bring quiet, and hopefully that'll bring some peace.
When you see your brother-in-law Tony after this execution day is complete, what will you say, and what do you think the feelings will be?
I just want to be there to support him, because I can't imagine what, the emotions he's got to be going through, and I just want to do what I can to help him through it.
I know this has been a difficult day for you, Glenn, and I certainly appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
To share your feelings with us, and we wish you only the best.
Thank you.
As this progresses. Thank you.
Thank you.
From the podium now, we've seen the warden's car approaching. Harry Lappin, the warden of the federal penitentiary here in Terre Haute. Media witnesses are getting off the bus now. And the warden is preparing to make a statement. Let's listen to Harley Lappin now.
I am Harley Lappin, the warden here at the United States Penitentiary, Terre Haute. The U.S. Marshal is still in the execution facility, completing his protocol responsibilities. The court order to execute inmate Timothy James McVeigh has been fulfilled. Pursuant to the sentence of the United States District Court in the District of Colorado, Timothy James McVeigh has been executed by lethal injection. He was pronounced dead at 7:14 a.m. Central Daylight Time. McVeigh's body will be released to a representative of his family. I'll now take a few questions, and then the news media who witnessed the execution will provide you with their observations.
What were his final words? What were his final words, sir?
Inmate McVeigh did not make a final statement. I have provided to the press a written statement he provided to me, and I've asked them to share that with you.
Can you tell us if you look calm? What does he look like?
I'm sorry.
Can you tell us if you looked calm? His demeanor.
The question is, what was his demeanor? Inmate McVeigh was calm throughout the entire process. He cooperated entirely during the time he was restrained in the execution holding cell, to the time he walked into the execution room. He stepped up onto a small step and sat down on the table. He then positioned himself for us to apply the restraints. He cooperated throughout this entire process.
This is your first execution. What feelings did you have watching this?
As you've heard me say before, I anticipated this to be a very difficult thing to do, and it was. But I think today, my thoughts and prayers are with the many victims of this tragedy in Oklahoma City.
Is there any reaction from family members?
I'd also like to say I have great appreciation for the citizens and the community leaders of Terre Haute who supported us and provided us assistance throughout this entire process. And to the many federal, state, and local law enforcement officials who partnered with us as we completed this execution. I don't remember the exact time of the drugs that were introduced, but we can provide that to you once we've taken a look at the log.
Did everything go as planned and everything? Did it all go according to your schedule?
Everything went as planned, except for one issue. We initially had slight difficulty gaining a transmission or a good transmission to Oklahoma City. So it took us a couple of minutes to resolve the problem, at which time we started up again after we gained a good transmission. There were no complications after the transmission was started.
Could you please tell us how many IVs you used?
We used one more.
Where was it?
The IV was placed in his right leg. Thank you.
So Warden Harley Lappin saying that Timothy McVeigh did not make a final statement, but he gave a written statement which is now being distributed to the press. Let's hear from the media witnesses now.
Then you will have the opportunity to ask questions. We'll start with Karen Grunden with the Terre Haute Tribune-Star. Oh, did you guys? Okay. I lied. They have an order that they've arranged within the media pool, and I'll let each of them introduce themselves as they go.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. I'm Byron Pitts from CBS News, BYRON-PITTS. Timothy James McVeigh died with his eyes open. When the curtains came back, he made eye contact with his people who came to support him. When the curtain passed the media center, Mr. McVeigh seemed to look up and intentionally make eye contact with each of us. Then when the curtain passed the room where the victims' relatives were and survivors, he turned his head to the right and made eye contact with them. He did not speak. But Mr. McVeigh did make write out a written statement that the warden passed out to each of us. I'll read it to you now. It reads, and this is written by Timothy McVeigh by hand. Final written statement of Timothy McVeigh. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconscionable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeoning of chance, my head is bloodied, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. And matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. He signs it at the end, June 11th, 2001.
We'll do questions after each of the individual statements.
Thank you.
I'm Shepard Smith from Fox News Channel. We were taken in as a group, S-H-E-P-A-R-D Smith, the Fox News Channel. We were standing at a glass window about 18 inches from his feet. He was wearing sneakers, you could see that. There were sheets up to here and folded over. His hands were down. He looked straight at the ceiling. When the curtains opened, to his left were his representatives. He sat up as much as he could in that chair and looked toward his window and nodded his head like that. Then came toward the media window where there were 10 of us, plus 5 people from the prison, plus 2 media representatives as well. He seemed to almost be trying to take charge of the room and understand his circumstances, nodding at each one of us individually, then sort of a cursory glance toward the government section. He lay there very still. He never said a word. His lips were very tight. He nodded his head a few times. He blinked a few times. Then when we were told that the first drug was administered, very tight lips and his very tight eye, or his very wide eyes changed considerably. His lips relaxed. His eyes relaxed. He looked toward the ceiling where there happened to be a camera staring right at Oklahoma City. And at that point, his eyes seemed to roll back only slightly. His body seemed to relax. His feet shifted just a bit. There was the administration of one drug and then another. And after the last drug, there was a very slight movement here. It was like standing on the other side of a glass wall and looking directly at a hospital bed. Tim McVeigh right at us, his hair very short, almost yellow. The only change between the prison jumpsuit shot that we all knew so well and today's Tim was he seems to have aged a little bit, and he chose to say nothing.
My name is Linda Cavanaugh, C-A-V-A-N-A-U-G-H. I'm with KFOR-TV in Oklahoma City. The last time I saw Tim McVeigh was in the courtroom in Denver. He had changed markedly. He was paler, he was thinner, and he did not have the same look of arrogance that he had in the courtroom in Denver. Today when we came in, his head was almost shaven. As they have described, he was laying flat, but as the windows opened, as though you were in a bed and you were trying to see what was over the edge of it, he strained his neck to look at us. His lips were partly open, his eyes were open, and when they started administering the drugs, he began staring at the ceiling. After the first drug was administered, his lips began turning a little bit paler. His skin became pale. After they administered the next drug, it appeared that he was breathing through his mouth for the first time, as though he was trying to control his breathing. He took 2 or 3 breaths like that. And then from that point on, for the next several minutes, when the final drug was administered until he was pronounced dead, there was no additional movement from Timothy McVeigh. It was a very orchestrated clinical procedure. I think it went fairly much as they had planned it. The marshal who was in the room and the warden who were in the room stood with their arms crossed in front of them, seldom looking at Timothy McVeigh. And the atmosphere in the press room was one of almost wonderment at what was transpiring in front of you, watching a man die. The procedure began when they said, "We are ready, you may proceed." At that point, they began the execution process. It culminated when the warden pronounced him dead at 7:14.
My name is Susan Carlson. I'm a reporter with WLS Radio in Chicago. When we walked in the room, we saw him just a few feet in front of us, and he was wrapped tightly in a white sheet. He almost looked like a mummy. And he deliberately lifted up his head and looked at one of us, each by each. He took the time to make eye contact with each of us, and he was slowly nodding as he was looking at each of us across the room, the media witnesses and the relative and the victim witnesses who were in a room adjacent to us. After he looked at everybody, he put his head back down and he stared straight up at the ceiling, and his eyes did not move from that position for the rest of the procedure. In fact, I didn't even see him blink once after they started administering the drugs, and he died with his eyes open. As he laid back in position and they started administering all the drugs, his breathing became a little more shallow. At one point, he filled up his cheeks with air and then just kind of let it go. But I don't believe that was his last breath. There was still some shallow breathing that followed. His skin began to turn a very strange shade of yellow towards the end, and he remained extremely rigid. I think as a reporter you cover a lot of things, and we've seen dead bodies, but the most chilling part of this was the fact, for me at least, that he took the time to look up and look at each of us in the eye, and there was almost a sense of pride as he nodded his head, laid back down, and seemed very resigned to his fate. He didn't have anything to say, but his poem, the written statement that he handed out before that he wrote before he passed on, indicated that same sense of pride, that this was what had to be done. What he did and what happened to him today was all part of his plan, and he seemed very content and very resigned to the fact that he was going to die, and he did not fight it, and he almost looked proud of what had happened. At this point, we're going to open it up for questions.
Did the execution start at exactly 7?
Well, they originally had said we were going to do 4 people and then questions. Absolutely.
My name is Rex Hupke, R-E-X-H-U-P-P-K-E. I'm with the Associated Press. Let me give you a better idea of sort of the timeline of how things unfolded. The first thing that we heard in the room through the speakers, which were in the ceiling, was the warden's voice saying, testing, 1, 2, 3. He was checking the feed to Oklahoma City. That happened at about 7:02. We heard his voice come back on about a minute later saying, having a little trouble with the video, just like I said, okay? Now, the curtains were still drawn, so I can't say for sure if he was speaking to McVeigh or not, but it sounded like it. The testing went on, then his voice came on again at about 7:05. Again, he said the same thing, testing 1, 2, 3, and then we heard him say, at 7:06, we're ready. And then the curtains were pulled. As they've described, McVeigh he looked first towards his lawyers, or towards his witnesses, which included his lawyers, and he kind of shook his head towards him. Then he looked at the media and kind of bounced his head towards each one of us. And then he looked over to, it would be his right, towards the victim witness room, which was a tinted glass pane, so he couldn't see into it, but he looked over, and he sort of, not real dramatic, but he sort of squinted a little bit, like he was trying to see through the tinted glass to see if he could see anything. At 7:10, they announced that the first drug had been administered. At that point, he was still conscious, it seemed. He was, his eyes were open and blinking a little bit. Very slowly, his eyes stopped moving, and his head was really perfectly lined up. He wasn't to one side or the other. He was very, very rigid and straight up and down. The eyes just sort of started to slowly move back just a little bit. The second drug was administered at 7:11. Then at that point was where we saw some of the, not really spasms exactly, but you saw a couple heavy breaths, and then that was by and large it. There was a little stomach movement. And at 7:15 they announced that the final drug had been administered. And then, I'm sorry, 7:13. Then at 7:14 the warden came on through the speaker again and announced that he had died.
I'm Nolan Clay, that's NolanClay with the Daily Oklahoman. in Oklahoma City. I just have a few more details. The poem was the Invictus poem, that British a poem that was written in the 1800s. I had a copy of it off the internet. I compared it to the written statement that was given to us. I'll see if we can get copies to people. Can we make copies of this in the command over at your PIO tent? Okay. At the top it says final written statement of Timothy McVeigh. Its signature is this scribbled thing that sometimes Mr. McVeigh would write, and it has June 11, 2001. We compared it to the poem. It seems to be word for word, punctuation, all that. We'll give you a few more details. That when the warden at one point said, "Marshal, we are ready, may we proceed?" And then the marshal picked up a red phone and said, "This is the U.S. Marshal to Department of Justice Command Center, may we proceed?" Something was said back to him. And then the marshal, who was Frank Anderson, said, "We may proceed with the execution." McVeigh was wearing a white T-shirt. The sheet came up to right about here. You just see the shoulders. The IV tubes look to be yellow and gray. They came from a slot in the wall behind us. He did look to be hooked up to an EKG machine. There was a black line. And he did stare straight up. His eyes, dying with his eyes open is correct. His eyes did roll back slightly. I also saw the gulping breath where his cheeks bubbled up, and I saw that twice. And I'll be glad to answer any questions after everybody's done. And anybody wants to see me, I'll go through more detail.
I'm Karen Grunden, Karin Grunden, Grunden, from the Terre Haute Tribune Star, and I'll provide you a few additional details as well. When we walked into the room, the curtain was closed. It was a bluish-green curtain, and a metal railing that came out from the wall kept us back from the window about 18 inches. There was a little bit of whispering among the guards right before this happened, some whispering in the room. As the time got closer, again, we had the testing 1, 2, 3 from the warden, and a correctional officer explained to us that they were checking the feed from Oklahoma City. And they also mentioned that we will be testing again, is what the correctional officer told us. They're having some problems in Oklahoma City with the video feed. When they got that straightened out, warden again said, testing 1, 2, 3, we're ready. And you could hear the sound of the curtain opening at that point. The white sheet was up to his chest, and he was also laying on a white sheet. There was a white sheet draped on the gurney. The warden and U.S. Marshal Frank Anderson both had earpieces in. They were standing next to each other. The warden did say, "Inmate McVeigh, you may make your last statement." At that point, there was silence. At that point, the warden read the sentencing information, and then the red phone was picked up after the warden said, "Marshal, we are ready. May we proceed?" The marshal responded, "Warden, you may proceed with the execution." And as others described, he looked around. He did swallow and puff some air, and you could see his chest moving up and down. The warden did look at Timothy McVeigh. His eyes blinked a few times, and then they remained open. And I'll let someone else go ahead and give their statement.
My name is Kevin Johnson with USA Today, JOHNSON. I'll take you outside the execution chamber a little bit. We were dropped off on I guess the main entrance, and walked up a path to a 13-foot high chain link fence topped by razor wire with a couple of heavily armed guards out front. And then we were ushered in. I thought perhaps the most remarkable part of it was, as other people have suggested here, or said here, and reported here, that his eyes and his line of sight followed the roll of the curtain from right to left, passing first the attorney's window, or his witness's window, then ours, past the government witnesses, and then past the victim witnesses from Oklahoma City. As others have stated, he did strain himself in from the gurney to look at each window, and as others have reported here, he did make eye contact with each of us, or at least tried to do that. Once that happened, though, it was relatively unremarkable in the sense that of his expression. He moved his head back and never moved it from that position, staring straight at the ceiling. His eyes became increasingly glassy, almost watery, as the process went on. However, before the first drug was administered, I think we all saw these couple of deep breaths, quick swallows, and then a fluttered breath from his lips. And then not much movement after that, perhaps a slight chest movement, as others have reported here before. Toward the end of the process, sometime before the warden pronounced time of death, it wasn't clear, or at least any signs of breathing were not visible to us. And he appeared again, as others have reported, his eyes were completely glassy at that point, and his skin color turned from almost a very, very pale, when we first saw him, to a light yellow. His lips also turned that color as well.
You've just been listening to the media witness describing the execution of Timothy McVeigh, saying that Mr. McVeigh died with his eyes open. Initially, he made contact with his representatives, with media representatives, with representatives from the victims' families and survivors of the blast, and a cursory glance at the government representatives who are witnessed today. He appeared paler and thinner to one witness, without the look of arrogance that she had previously recognized. And his final statement was a written one. He did not have any final words, but his statement, as expected, came from a 19th century English poem called Invictus. Timothy McVeigh is dead this morning. He died at 7:14 Central Time. We just have word that the president will speak to the nation at 9:45 this morning. For those of you who have to leave us, we'll be back on the air at that time. For those of the rest of you that will stay, the early show continues now. I'm Jane Clayson, CBS News in Terre Haute, Indiana. This has been a special report from CBS News. Welcome back to the early show this Monday morning. I'm Jane Clayson in Terre Haute, Indiana, where just moments ago, Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh was put to death by lethal injection at the federal penitentiary here. Bob McNamara is in Oklahoma City this morning, where bombing survivors and victims' loved ones just witnessed McVeigh's death on closed-circuit TV. Bob?
Good morning, Jane. Well, there were actually 232 bomb survivors and victims' family members that saw the closed-circuit broadcast of Tim McVeigh's execution. 300 people had originally signed up to see it. There is no definitive word yet exactly on what actually happened inside the auditorium, but there is a podium that is not far from here where people can stop and express their views and answer questions. Also, a media bus has just arrived here with about 35 people who have made prior commitments to networks and local stations and newspapers, so we should get some answers soon. Especially one of the things on their mind will probably be the fact that McVeigh delivered no oral statement before he died. Many people here were expecting him to at least deliver some rancor, on the outside chance perhaps some remorse, but that of course didn't happen. His written statement was basically all about him. Jane?
Rob, there were some initial reports of transmission problems to Oklahoma City. Was there a disruption there that you noticed?
I can tell you only what I heard coming from Terre Haute, that there was some video problems. That's all I know right here, right now.
And the mood outside, are people leaving now? Are they staying around? Are they comforting each other? What do you see?
They are comforting each other and they are leaving. Some of them have just arrived here and they will be talking to you shortly. They did stay, I thought, for some time after the execution, and for what reason I don't really know yet, but they seem not to leave right away, that they did stay around, board their buses, and then leave. But they will be telling you about that shortly.
All right, Bob McNamara in Oklahoma City. We want to head now to correspondent John Frankel, who is outside Terre Haute. John, what can you tell us this morning?
Well, Jane, we're standing here now hearing from the 10 media witnesses that witnessed the execution. They have given us great detail about what they saw, most people interpreting the execution in very much the way that you have described it, all very similar. All were really taken, it seems, by the way that Timothy McVeigh died with his eyes open. Also the fact that his skin color did change from this paleness to this yellow tone, both in his cheeks and in his lips. Byron Pitts, CBS News correspondent, was just talking about the sort of temperament of Timothy McVeigh as he was executed. And he said one of the things that he was really struck by was that over the last few years, Timothy McVeigh has claimed to be a soldier. And Byron said he didn't see him so much as a soldier in those last few minutes, but simply a man who was about to die. That arrogance, that cockiness, that swagger that Timothy McVeigh seemed to give off didn't exist anymore. That this was a man who definitely was afraid that he was going to die. In fact, when he was asked by the warden if he wanted to issue a final statement, Byron said that that was probably the quietest moment of the procedure, that everybody was sort of waiting with bated breath for McVeigh to issue some sort of statement, and of course he did not. He wrote out a final statement that he then handed to the warden. So these witnesses have given us quite a bit to put the pieces together and have really fueled our imagination and put things in place for us. Again, the eyes wide open when he was executed, that was something that everybody picked up on. Also the fact that when he was, the curtains were open, that McVeigh made a concerted effort to look at each of the witness rooms and then settled back. Jane?
John, let me read to you the final words from the poem that Timothy McVeigh read this morning. I'm the master of my fate. I'm the captain of my soul. Timothy McVeigh, dead this morning, 7:14 Central Time. The Early Show continues after this.